I'm going to make a bold statement here. In 10 years, the innovations coming into healthcare are going to come from consumer-facing technology companies. They're not going to come from healthcare. Hey there, Rafi Salazar from the Better Outcomes Show, and today, another solo episode here. We're talking about, do you read much? And if you do read, as a healthcare entrepreneur, business owner, practice manager even, what do you spend your time reading? I wrote an article on this a while back and got a bunch of emails about it, talked to some colleagues that thought it was pretty interesting take, so I'm going to bring it here to you here. The whole basic premise was, I think the title of the article, I'll link to it in the show notes, is something like how reading outside of your field can make you a better practitioner, entrepreneur, business owner, even professional in your own industry. So it's how reading outside your field can make you better in your industry. Now, often when we think of advancing our healthcare careers, whether that be through business, through career advancement, if you're in the corporate world and climbing a ladder, in the consulting world, whatever, we think that improving our business skills or even becoming more innovative in the field, that we need to focus on information, cutting edge resources, research, developments, etc. In our industry. So for example, this is all about healthcare here. If we're a healthcare technology founder or something like that, we've got a tech startup in the healthcare space, we think that in order to advance that business forward, in order to launch and to make it maybe scale or get better and bigger or more innovative, what we need to do is really focus on the top trends happening in healthcare and almost exclusively at the detriment of other things. And that makes sense, right? Like, how can you become an innovative leader in healthcare, as an example, if you're not staying up to date with current healthcare trends and advancements? And this was my take from the article, and I'll reiterate it again, but being well informed on your field, the recent advancements, what maybe tech companies are starting in your space, et cetera, is really just the baseline. It's not anything special. So if we want to advance our careers, our businesses, our startups in ways that either leapfrog or outperform competitors or colleagues or peers in the field, we not only need to be doing that, like everyone should be doing that. You should know what new, we're in the world of AI now, so what new AI-based musculoskeletal assessment or tool is out there for physical therapists, for example. You should know what's out there. You should know it's maybe you're not testing it all, maybe you're not using it in your clinic or your business, or maybe if you're a founder, you're not following them, all over the place and trying to emulate what they're doing, but you need to be aware of what's going on, the advancements that are being made. But what often sets leaders that are innovative apart from their peers even stems from their ability to take insights and ideas from outside of their field and apply it to their industry. So I know I've shared about this book before several times on the podcast. It's called The Business of Expertise by David C. Baker. And he talks a little bit about, kind of ancillarily, this idea of having a wide personal life and then and taking insights or ideas that you might get maybe from a walk in the woods or hunting or fishing. These are some of my activities that I like, and then applying it to your field. Sometimes having a wide breadth of personal interests and hobbies can yield some results and value for your professional work. So this is the same idea except taken to reading. I don't know how many business owners, healthcare, tech startup founders, practice owners, C-suite executives that I speak to talk about the books they're reading, and by and large, the majority of them are business-related books, right? They're maybe marketing books, they're healthcare-specific books. We've had some of those authors here on the show. Your AI Doctor, ChatGPT in healthcare, all of those. And that's great. That you should be staying abreast of that. My thought is that, again, that should just be kind of what you're aware of. That's just the baseline. You're kind of aware of what's coming up the field. So you miss a lot by not reading outside of the field. So at the beginning of this year, this is 2025, I made the decision basically to change up my reading habits for it was going to be for a couple months, and now it's been the better part of a year, and we'll see how long it goes. But I decided to read nothing that was business related or books, anyways, business related or healthcare related for the book that I keep on my nightstand, for example, the book that I'm reaching for to grab to read when, there's downtimes in between, maybe kids are out and away or at nap or whatever, the book that I'm grabbing. So I did this for two main reasons. One, I wanted to read for leisure again. I wanted to enjoy it. We're teaching a couple of our kids to read. I've got a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a few more under that. But those are the ones that are in the reading age. And I'm trying to get them to enjoy reading really as a life skill. And that meant that I needed to enjoy reading, which meant it was going to have to be something that I wanted to pick up, not because I felt like I had to for work or for business, but because I was genuinely enjoying maybe the story or what I was reading about. So that was the first reason. The second reason was I wanted to see what cool insights were out there that I could pull from something that was totally not related to healthcare business and apply it to my own businesses and my own consulting work. So you'd be surprised how often ideas from seemingly unrelated fields can unlock new ways of thinking about your own work, your profession, your business, your startup, your profession or industry even. For example, a story about survival in the Alaskan wilderness, which we'll talk about here in a minute, might teach you more about resilience and process management, maybe even than the latest leadership manual that you read or a conference you attended or something like that. A deep dive into the history of jazz, for example, might shift your perspective on improvisation. That's a pretty chintzy one and pretty easy, low-hanging fruit. But the more I began to read outside of the typical business playbooks, the more I became convinced of this idea. And maybe I'll go back to having a business book on the nightstand down the line, but at least for the foreseeable future, I'm definitely going to have something that's not involved at all. So what I'm going to do in this episode is I'm going to break down just 3 books that I've read recently in the last couple of months and some of the insights that I drew from them that I've applied to consulting work here in healthcare, maybe healthcare technology, the business, the practice that I run, etc. So the first one is One Man's Wilderness. This is a book, I think his name is Keith Prenneke. He went into Alaska like in the mid or late 60s, early 70s, and he was, I think, 51 when he did it. And the book is really just his journal and his photography. He gets flown in with everything that he's going to survive with on his back, basically, and he builds a cabin from scratch, spends a year in Alaska, and kind of documents the whole process, so the book is very much like December 21st, did XYZ, did put the first layer of logs for the log cabin or put the gravel for the floor, whatever it was. So that's the whole idea of the book, is that and then he's taking pictures along the way. It's a great read. If you enjoy the outdoors, check out One Man's Wilderness. It's a cool one. But one of the quotes that he put in the book super early that I pulled from, probably maybe like the first 10 or 15 pages, was, I'm just going to read it here. Quote, "Too many men work on parts of things. Seeing a job through to completeness satisfies a man." So this quote kind of stuck right out to me when I was reading it, and I immediately thought of some applications for healthcare in particular. So again, it's an example of how a non-healthcare book kind of gave me insights that running and managing teams within the healthcare practice, the organizations that I consult for and advise, and I've kind of taken this idea and run with it. What can we learn from this quote specifically as it relates to healthcare? Maybe managing a team or managing a business that's involved in healthcare, whether it be direct service delivery or technology, SaaS, whatever. I don't know about you, but I know that nearly every one of my team members works on a small part of the process of delivering healthcare, at least in our business, right? In the practice that I own and operate. Clinicians, for example, provide the treatment and complete documentation. Care coordination, for example, schedules the patients and manages the schedule, filling in gaps, doing this, that, and the other. Patient access coordinators coordinate the benefits, the eligibility, the authorizations. They're all bits and pieces, and they all need to fit together in order to deliver hopefully a unique and positive patient experience profitably. But no one person is seeing the entire process of care through to completion. It's easy for each of those team members now to fall into a silo of their role within the organization or on the team, right? It makes sense. When you spend all day treating patients in the clinic, for example, that's where your time is focused. It's natural to zero in on that piece of the process. The problem is, when you only focus on your one piece, you lose sight of the whole. And in healthcare, for example, the whole matters. When we just work with the parts of things, as Prentice says, we miss the bigger picture sometimes at the expense of like patient experience and engagement and ultimately clinical outcomes, right? The patient journey, the continuity of care, the smooth handoff from one department to the next, all relies on not people just doing their job, their part of the job super well, but also understanding how their piece fits into the greater whole, the bigger puzzle, if you would. So how do you kind of overcome that? Well, the cure is a mindset shift, right? So what I did after reading this, is like, okay, we're going to begin not just understanding that our team members are working on different parts of the process of care, but really communicating that in a way. So you need to get out of your silos, obviously, and look at the entire process from front to back and get the whole team involved. So the other day, for example, we had an issue we were trying to troubleshoot on like remote therapeutic monitoring or something like that. And they're each different section or department of the clinic has a different piece of delivering RTM services, right? So, but having the conversation all together means that when we were throwing out ideas, for example, when we were talking about troubleshooting problems or challenges or how do we overcome this, that, and the other, everybody's understanding how what they do fits into the greater picture, and then it also gives them perspective on what the other departments might be addressing. Maybe it might not make sense for a clinician why the administrative team doesn't want to follow this process versus that process until they discuss the entirety of the plan of care or the process of delivering care, and then it makes sense, right? So in healthcare, it's not just about getting the things done, the individual things done. It's about getting them done right from start to finish in one seamless or smooth transition, right? So if you're leading a team in healthcare, for example, you want to ask your team members regularly, like, do you understand or do you know how the job that you're doing, the role that you're playing fits into the bigger picture of the organization, of this patient's, maybe the specific patient's care that's delivered or received here at the clinic, et cetera, et cetera. If the answer is no, go back to this quote. Okay, then we need to begin helping you not just work on your part, but understand that you're working on something bigger, like you're seeing a job through to completion, even if it's delivering your specific piece of it. But communicating the entirety to your team members helps get that buy-in, helps troubleshoot problems, helps make your team more creative in the problem solving as well. So there's the first quote, and again, I'd recommend that book 100 times out of 10, 100 times out of 100. If you're into the outdoors, if you want to see some good pictures, some good photography of the Alaskan wilderness, One Man's Wilderness is a great book. The next book that I read once a year, at least, is The Alchemist. I actually quoted the book in the last chapter of my book, Better Outcomes: A Guide to Humanizing Healthcare. I'll link to that in the show notes below. But The Alchemist is a story by Paulo Coelho, and it's basically follows the story of Santiago, a farmer or a shepherd in Spain. He has a recurrent dream about treasure, and he goes off to find his treasure, to fulfill his personal legend. And the story is all about him meeting an alchemist, understanding what alchemy is, and then going and basically finding his treasure, right? And not the way that he thought it would. Like there's a big turn of events or whatever. So again, I've talked about it. I'm not going to beat that dead horse, but it's a great book. I read it once a year because I truly do enjoy it. It's probably one of my most favorite nonfiction books, or my favorite fiction books. It's not a nonfiction book. My favorite fiction books or pieces of literature out there. If you're into Audible, Jeremy Irons does a rendition of it on Audible that is awesome. I have that one too, and I listen to it every now and then. But The Alchemist, great book. Read it once a year. It's an inspiring story. But the quote that I read from this, and I basically I'm going to lift this from the book that I wrote, is talking about a spoon. So the quote is, boom, "The secret of happiness is to see all the marvels of the world and to never forget about the drops of oil in the spoon." This is one of my favorite quotes in the book. It's one of my favorite life lessons that I've pulled out of a book, actually. So the background here is the alchemist is telling the shepherd this story about a boy who goes to see the wisest man in the world to ask him the meaning of happiness or the secret to happiness. And when he gets to the wise man's palace, it's slam full. He can't get a word in edgewise. There's a huge giant line. He waits for hours to see the wise man. By the time he gets there, he asks the wise man, "I want to know what the secret of happiness is." And the wise man says, "Well, this is something that is far too complex for me to share now. Why don't you go take in the views of the palace, check out the tapestries. I've got a lot of artwork hung up, the beautiful gardens, the rich scenery, et cetera, et cetera. Go and observe that for the next couple hours and come back, and then I will share with you the meaning of happiness or the secret of happiness." And as the boy is about to leave, the wise man says, "Wait, before you leave, take this spoon, and I'm going to put a couple drops of oil in this spoon, and don't spill the oil." So the boy spends the next several hours wandering the wise man's house and his gardens and looking at the views, but the whole time his eyes are fixed on the drops of oil in the spoon so as not to spill them. A couple hours pass, and the boy goes back to see the wise man, and the wise man says, "Okay, well, what did you think about my tapestries and the hand-carved mahogany doorways and the mantels and the paintings on the wall and the garden that took the master gardener 10 years to make, et cetera, et cetera?" And the boy says, "Well, I didn't really see much of that. I was trying not to spill the oil in the spoon." And the wise man tells the boy, "Well, go then and look, because how can you trust a man if you don't know how he lives?" So the boy goes and he takes it all in. He spends another hour or so looking at all of the tapestries, the hand-carved mahogany. He wanders through the garden. He climbs up and down some stairs. He takes it all in and becomes really overjoyed with what he sees. It's so beautiful. It's so amazing. So he goes back to see the wise man, and the wise man says, "So, how do you like my house?" And he said, "Oh my gosh, it's wonderful. The tapestry in this room is great. The garden is amazing. The views of the sea are wonderful." And the wise man then says, "Okay, well, what about the drops of oil in the spoon?" And the boy looks down and realizes that he has spilled them somewhere along the way, that second time. And the wise man looks at the boy and says, "All I can tell you is this: the secret to happiness is to see and take in all the marvels of the world, but to never forget about the drops of oil on the spoon." Now, how in the world does this apply to healthcare? I make a good case of it in the book, but I'll just kind of re-say that for y'all here. When I first read this story, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, man, this is totally applicable to our role as clinicians, as healthcare entrepreneurs, as practice owners. Fell in love with the quote. Especially as healthcare providers, I just said, it's very easy to get wrapped up in the doing of healthcare, right? We complete assessments, we write our notes, we implement protocols, all while making sure we're meeting productivity levels and utilization metrics, et cetera, without thinking really much about why we're doing it. Even some master clinicians, they become so so engulfed in becoming a master clinician, learning everything, deepening their clinical knowledge, understanding the innovations from new cutting edge treatment techniques or new evidence, clinical evidence, and applying it to practice, that we often forget the fact that the patient sitting in front of us is the drops of oil in our proverbial spoons, right? And what our job as clinicians, really the secret to really having a long and fulfilling healthcare career, is to take that extra course, get that certification, apply all of your time and energy into gaining this specialized skill, knowledge, and expertise. However, we can't forget that our main job, the whole reason we have a job in the first place, is the patient sitting across from us, and not so much fitting them into our little, our box, our framework, our protocol for how we deliver care, but really understanding and meeting them where they're at, and then guiding them through on their journey to recovery. Like, that is our role as clinicians. So, one of the things I'm just going to read this section from the book, but so new technology, innovative treatment techniques, operational efficiency, and even things like population health, they're all great. But they are secondary to the primary purpose of healthcare, which is helping individual people improve their health and well-being, overcome injuries and dysfunctions, and chart their own path towards healing and long-term recovery. Even when it comes to population health as a whole, the most effective way we can make headway in that regard lies in the ability to affect individual patient lives. And those, again, are the drops of oil in the spoon. So The Alchemist, great book. I can't recommend it enough. If you want to hear an in-depth breakdown of that quote in particular, the drops of oil in the spoon, the last chapter of my book, Better Outcomes to Guide to Humanizing Healthcare, I kind of go into a little bit more detail about it. The last book that I'll quote here is a book called Story Worthy, which I read earlier this year in 2025. It's all about, I think Matt might be here somewhere. It's somewhere on a bookshelf around here. It's by a guy named, I believe, Matthew Dix, and it's all about how to craft amazing stories. So one of my favorite side gigs that I like to tell people is, besides being, who I am, running all the business, the podcast, the clinic, consulting with tech companies here, there, and everywhere. One of the things that I get to do a lot, which is really fun, has been fun for the last several years, is being the resident storyteller in my home for my 6 kids. So doesn't pay much at all, but we have a good time. In fact, one of my, for a long time, I was telling a series of stories. I just kind of made them up on the spot for my kids, about a guy named Uncle George who lived in Alaska. And so last year for Father's Day, my wife got me this coffee mug that says Uncle George on it. A little inside joke there. But anyways, I love telling stories to the kids. It's just one of those things that kind of happened haphazardly, and one of those nights where I was like, I'm not reading Goodnight Moon again. I'm going to just make up a story from scratch, and now I do it every night. So more or less, especially with the younger ones. So the book Story Worthy, I figured, if I'm going to be telling a bunch of stories, I got to get really good at telling stories. My kids are getting older now. My oldest is 10. This winging it on the fly isn't cutting it. I need to start putting some meat on these stories and start getting really good about crafting them in a way that's engaging. So I read Story Worthy by Matthew Dix, and in the book, I want to say he says this is one of those things that, if you don't take anything else away from the book, read this. And the quote was something, the quote is this: regardless of whether your change is infinitesimal or profound, positive or negative, your story must reflect change. You must begin and end your story in entirely different states of being. Change is key for stories, for engaging stories. So this idea, again, about change really struck me when I was thinking about it, because I'm reading this book in the midst of life. I'm not taking a month off to read these books. So I'm having issues at the clinic. I'm coming up with challenges when I'm addressing whatever consulting project or whatever. This quote about change really stuck with me, specifically as it relates to healthcare, because this idea of communicating change is not just relevant, it's like the fundamental piece of healthcare. I wrote an article years ago for Rehab U Practice Solutions about the trans-theoretical model of change or behavioral change, and how really as clinicians, whether we like to admit it or not, we are in the behavior change business for nearly every aspect of healthcare, right? I mean, the low-hanging fruit would be I'm in occupational physical therapy, right? Like we're trying to get our patients to incorporate real behavior changes, completing exercises, changing, activity modifications, maybe lifestyle management and changes. The same is true. I've got a buddy of mine who's a PA in a nephrology practice, and he says that diabetes is the disease of non-compliance, right? Because you've got these patients who have all these risk factors and they're failing to make these lifestyle changes to stave off type 2 diabetes, right? So when you look at the reason for that, like how are we as an industry so poor at changing people's behavior? One of the key things, at least in my mind, I don't know if I have research to back this up, one of my inclinations or feelings is that the reason that we as healthcare providers fail to effectively change or get our patients to change their healthcare behaviors or their health and wellness behaviors is because we do a poor job of communicating the change in a way that is engaging and enticing or motivational, right? So thinking about the patient journey, for example, at its core is a story of transformation, right? Whether it's recovering from an injury, managing a chronic condition, or achieving maybe a higher level of physical health or mental health, the goal is always change, right? The patient comes to you in state A, and we're hoping to get them into state B, B being better, right? So let me find where my notes here. Let me see here. Okay, yeah. So we're in the business of change, right? We want to get our patients to change their behavior, either to remove something or add something in. Relying on kind of the standard patient engagement or patient education process of like, here's a bunch of informational handouts about why what you're doing is going to kill you in the case of like diabetes or heart disease or something like that. Make your lifestyle changes and we'll check back with you in 6 months, might give the patient all of the information, the knowledge that they need, but they don't have the why behind it maybe, and they don't have really the belief that it is possible, right? So stories, the way we communicate to our patients about their current state of affairs, their current state of health, where we believe they can get to, where the research maybe even shows that they can, the outcomes they can achieve, without a good narrative story that maybe it's a case study, or maybe it's just spinning the information in a way that is in a narrative fashion for this patient, maybe talking about their desired future state, for example, and the story that it takes, the process that the journey that they will take to get there. All we're doing is providing information, which is not really valuable, number one, because it's not specific to that patient's information or that patient's specific situation, but it's not really motivational either. I think we've talked about motivational interviewing on the show. We've talked about behavioral change on the show. Like, the idea here is that it's not enough to simply give patients information about what they've got going on and hope that they make a lifestyle change, right? Like, you can information people to death and they will still not make a decision that positively benefits them in a lot of ways, even if they know, like, smoking is bad for you, for example. Everybody knows smoking is bad for you. People are still gonna smoke, right? So people are drinking in excess is bad for you. People still do it, right? Why? One, maybe because we don't understand the coping mechanism that behavior is, the reason that behavior is there, and we need to dig down into that. But then also, when it comes to helping them overcome that, lifestyle activity or behavior, They don't have, one, the belief that it can be possible to overcome. Two, they don't have a clear vision of what that looks like. What does the journey entail? What steps do I need to take? How does it work for me? And they don't have it. They don't have that information in a way that motivates them to take action, right? So again, as healthcare providers, as healthcare communicators, if we're able to take the information that we know to be true, that we know the research is supporting, and communicate it to a patient in a way that is engaging, that might, show that journey that the patient, outline the journey the patient's about to take with you, and motivate them to take action, that's going to be much more effective than here's a bunch of pamphlets, right? So the most successful healthcare organizations are the ones that don't just respond to change, they drive it. They recognize that transformation isn't just inevitable, it's necessary for their own organization, but also for their patients' lives. So whether you're talking about integrating digital health, for example, embracing value-based care models for your own business, or rethinking what patient engagement looks like, those that adapt and evolve, they write the story, right? They get their team on board by communicating the vision of the future, right? Their desired future state. And the same thing can happen in the clinical waiting room or in the clinical treatment room when we're discussing behavior changes with our patients, is outlining that desired future state and the clear and attainable steps to get there. So anyways, those are the three quotes that I use in the article. I thought they'd be worth discussing here. So a few closing thoughts about the unexpected advantage of looking and reading beyond your field. This is targeted towards healthcare providers and healthcare business owners and entrepreneurs, so reading outside of healthcare. That it's easy to get stuck in the echo chamber of your own industry, specifically in healthcare. We tend to double down on the same resources or sources, the same business books, the same industry updates or newsletters. We probably all subscribe to the same newsletters, right? And yet, while that's important to understand, kind of have a pulse on what's going on in healthcare, specifically maybe in AI in healthcare or digital healthcare implementation or something like that, you need to know what's in your field, obviously. You need to know what's going on. But what I've come to find, and what this kind of exploration and reading outside of the industry has reinforced in my own mind, is that real insight often comes from outside of the field and brought in. I think we had the folks from Movality here, it's been probably a year or so. They were doing an AI visual analysis and tracking software. It also did some documentation. And Mohammed, one of the co-founders, basically his take was that healthcare was not going to be fixed by healthcare practitioners, because we're so involved in healthcare that we can't see the forest for the trees, and real innovation and real change was going to come from outside, right? And I totally think that is the truth. I think we are in a world probably in the next 10 years are going to come from consumer-facing technology companies. They're not going to come from healthcare insurance companies. They're not going to come from UHC and this big giant conglomerate that owns hospitals and owns provider groups and owns insurance companies and has a digital health piece of it, because all of those infrastructure pieces, all of those systems are built on the current way of delivering and paying for healthcare services, right? I think the real disruption, the real value that is going to be created for healthcare, the real positive outcomes that we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years are going to come from, maybe it's not Amazon, but the Amazons of today, right? A direct to consumer, maybe subscription model even of healthcare, where it's your Prime membership gives you access to, they're already doing it, right? They've already got Amazon Pharmacy. So this idea where you have this consumer-facing tech company that branches into healthcare, not to play by the same rules that we've done for the last 100 years and bill insurance and look for authorizations and this, that, and the other, but looking for a way to monetize the healthcare service and expertise and value they're delivering outside of that system. And it's going to be something, in at least, again, prediction-wise, don't have any research or data to back this up, It's just a prediction that I think it's going to be one of those things that is fundamentally revolutionary to healthcare in the United States, maybe throughout the world, in a way that changes the health insurance game here in the United States. Maybe those companies go out of business, or maybe they just fall into irrelevancy, or maybe they are forced to shift the way that they pay for and deliver healthcare services, right? But that change is going to come from outside of the healthcare industry, and it's going to affect all the different levels, right? It's going to affect how providers deliver care, maybe how providers monetize their care. It's going to it's going to upend the way consumers access care, patients access care. It's going to upend hospital systems and big corporate healthcare provider organizations, the way that they fund their organizations, the way that they drive business, the business models underlying healthcare. And again, that's not going to come from within, because there's too much of a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. What's going to happen is a big player, maybe an Amazon, maybe a Walmart Health, who knows, or maybe some other company that we're not even aware of yet, is going to come in and just radically change, like just flip the card table over in healthcare and say, no, this is the way we should be doing healthcare. Why? Because it works in another field, in another industry. It makes a whole lot of sense. The monetization route is super sustainable. It's affordable. It's efficient, et cetera, et cetera. And all of you players that are still in this 19th century model of healthcare where you're paying fee for service are gonna, can't compete with us, basically. And I think ultimately that's going to be, at least that's my hope down the line. I do think that that's the future we're going to see. And again, it's coming from outside. The whole key here is that, and the whole point of this episode is that oftentimes insights and innovations that really make an impact in an industry, let's say healthcare here, come from outside of it. And the only way to really stay up to date with that would be to read outside of your industry, not just reading the same old healthcare tech newsletters that we're all reading, or the same podcasts or articles or books on managing healthcare practices the same way or whatever. We need to begin looking outside, and from the outside, from that broader perspective, we will gain insights. They might not be super revolutionary for the industry, but they might totally change your business and your practice and your startup in healthcare, for example. So that's it. That's all I've got this week. If you like episodes like this, shoot me an email, info@rehabupracticesolutions.com, and just tell me what you liked about it. If you want to get updated whenever we do drop episodes, we tend to be on an every other week cycle on Wednesdays. Go to betteroutcomes.show. There's a form there to fill out. You can sign up. We'll shoot you an email with the show notes and the links to everything that we reference. We're heading into, right now it's June of 2025, so we're about to head into a lull of episodes and stuff like that, because I've got some business travel I'm doing, some family travel I'm doing. I'm going to try to pre-record a bunch of stuff and get it scheduled out. But I'm excited to see what the latter half of 2025 has for us and beyond. And hopefully this episode kind of inspires you to pick up that novel or that book that you've thought about reading, but you felt like you just didn't have time because you had too many healthcare business books to read. So pick up something else, get the insights, apply it to your business, and let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear from you. So until the next time, folks, be safe, be healthy. I will talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Better Outcomes Show with Rafi Salazar. This episode is brought to you by Strata PT. Strata PT is a single EMR platform and revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how their EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo.